Hello, and welcome back to the Walk and Talk podcast on this glorious Friday. If you are listening on release day, I hope you are well. I hope your dog is living their very best life. And I hope the joys of spring are well and truly upon you both. But do you know what? Even if they're not, even if it's drab and dreary, it's all good because I've got your back with today's episode. I've well and truly got you. If you are feeling just a little bit crappy, if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling like maybe you're not making the progress you think you should be by now, or you don't know what to do with your dog to solve your current struggles, or maybe you do know what to do, but you don't really know why you're still not doing it, fear not. We are going to get you back on track today because, as long-term listeners of this podcast will already know, training your dog is not just about your dog and what they are doing and how their brain works and what energy they are bringing to the show, but it's absolutely about all of those things for you as well. Whether you are feeling hideously overwhelmed or you are just second guessing everything at the moment, or you are constantly scrolling on your phone and you're watching other people online and wondering, why does this look so easy for them? When you are here with at least 10 different pieces of conflicting advice floating around your head. And yet again, in the moment when your dog actually needs you, your brain just goes blank and you can't remember any of it and you do nothing. If any of that resonates with you in the slightest, then definitely stick around because we're going to talk about imposter syndrome in dog training. We're going to talk about emotional overwhelm for dog owners, and we're going to look at decision fatigue because I think, especially in the world we live in today, right, where you've probably already consumed at least, I don't know, 50 pieces of content, 100 pieces of content before you've even started work in the morning. Maybe it's even loads more than that. I don't even know. I have no idea, literally, if that number is accurate or not. But do you know what I mean? Because of these little black rectangles that we carry around everywhere we go with us now, we are bombarded. We have no idea how much we are bombarded with so much information on a daily basis. And our brains just cannot cope with it. Like, they weren't designed for this. And I think it's so mentally exhausting to then see all of this stuff, if you're looking at dog training stuff, and try and decide what the best approach actually is, that we end up actually not choosing anything because there's too much choice. And then as a result of that, we end up not actually doing anything. And then as a result of that, we end up just beating ourselves up because we've still got all the same problems we had a month ago, a year ago, despite all of this research we've done and all of the good intentions that we had. What I want to do in this episode is not just validate that experience for anyone and everyone who feels like they relate to it, but also let's actually break it down. Let's look at it from a behavioral science perspective, from a neuroscience perspective. And then, most importantly, as is our absolute favorite pastime over here, let's translate that into genuine, real, practical shifts that you can start implementing and using immediately to make changes and start feeling better. Because once you understand why your brain is giving you such a hard time, to be honest, you've taken the first step in figuring out how to actually change it, how to work with it and not against it, and how to start pushing forward on your goals again, which is hopefully what we're all after. So, okay, let's start with something that might be a bit controversial, but I think is important. So, there are, to be honest, a great deal of dog training struggles that people are dealing with that are not actually about the dog. Please don't hate me or cancel me for saying that, because I'm in no way dismissing genuine behavioral challenges. Of course, those exist. Of course, they do. I wouldn't have a job otherwise. But your internal state of play, your nervous system, your mood, your mindset, your outlook on life, it absolutely brings a lot of flavor to those challenges as well, because actually your ability to respond to those challenges, your consistency, your timing, your clarity, your general commitment to the cause, all of that is filtered through your internal state. And when your internal state is all dysregulated, so when you're overwhelmed or you're stressed or anxious or you're feeling unsure, that shows up immediately in your training, your interaction, your relationship with your dog, and your cues get less clear, or your timing gets later and messier, or your reinforcement just gets inconsistent and a bit sloppy. Your body language changes 100%. And of course, your dog, who is an absolute expert in reading all of these subtle shifts, they pick up on that instantly. So, what we often find is actually happening is a cycle something like this. So you're feeling a bit off, you're feeling a bit unsure, you're feeling out of whack, right? So your training becomes less effective for all of those little reasons that I've just listed. So then obviously your dog is going to respond less accurately, less clearly, because now he's not really sure. And so, because he's not sure and it's not really going very well, you now feel even more unsure yourself because this isn't going very well. And then, like, round and round it goes. And what happens when we get stuck in a loop where what we're doing doesn't really seem to be working out for us and we're not getting anywhere? This is when imposter syndrome creeps in. Now, please know that imposter syndrome in dog training is wildly, ridiculously common. And I'm willing to wager that your own intrusive thoughts have probably included one or more of the following statements at some point or another across your entire dog owning, dog training adventure so far, right? Things like this. Oh, I don't really know what I'm doing here. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm definitely doing this wrong. 100% I'm getting this wrong. Other people seem to be able to get better results than me really easily and quickly. I should have this figured out by now. I should know what I'm doing. Literally, we've all been there. We've all been there with intrusive thoughts like that. I've been there too. Of course I have. Sometimes I still get them. But do you know what's fascinating from a psychological perspective about imposter syndrome? It doesn't come from a lack of ability, not in the slightest, but it actually comes from your increased awareness. So, the more that you learn about dog training, the more nuance that you start to understand, the more layers you see, ultimately, the more aware that you become of what you don't know. And your brain then interprets that awareness as inadequacy, basically. But actually, realistically, it's a sign of progression. It's the same cognitive pattern we see in something called the Dunning-Kruger effect, where basically beginners to something, whatever it is, like a total newbie, they often feel overly confident because they don't yet see the complexity of the task, if you know what I mean. So you can probably relate to this if you've ever, you've watched someone do something on TV or you've seen someone do something, like you're at the park and you see someone riding a skateboard and they make it look really easy and you're like, oh, I might get a skateboard actually and give that, well, I don't know, not if you're my age, you probably won't consider getting a skateboard, but you know what I mean? You're like, oh, that doesn't look that hard. I might get one of those and give that a go. I could probably learn that. Or I don't know, something like watching someone skiing or watching someone play basketball. You're like, oh, that doesn't like look too complicated. I reckon I could learn that. I'm going to get some lessons. I think one example of this is my son. He plays the piano and he's been learning piano since, well, for years and years, right? And he's incredible. He can just sit down at the piano and bosh out the most beautiful music. And a couple of years ago, I thought, right, I want to learn the piano. I've always wanted to learn music. It can't be that hard, can it? I got myself one of these online kind of subscriptions where you get these online piano lessons. And I started learning and I was like, well, I'm going to bosh through this early stuff like really quickly because it's really easy. And I started learning and then I was like, oh my God, there is so much, because I would be a complete newbie, right? I can't even really read music more than at a very basic like primary school level. And yeah, I suddenly realized how much about reading music, playing music, learning music that I actually didn't know. Like I didn't even know was involved, didn't know it was a thing. Um, and so that's what happens, right? When you start something and you actually get into it and you become that slightly more advanced learner that's in the throes of learning the thing, you then feel less confident than that newbie at the start who knew nothing because you're aware. You're aware of all the things that you didn't know. I think learning to drive a car is probably another really good example that most of us can relate to. You know, when you're 12 years old and you think about learning to drive as a grown up, and you probably just think, well, it's probably really straightforward, right? You just think about the bumper cars at the fair or whatever, and you think, well, you got to learn how to go, how to stop, how to steer it. And that's pretty much it. That can't be that hard, can it? And then as soon as you get into a car with a proper instructor for your very first lesson, all of a sudden they're talking about like the clutch and finding the biting point and the gears and when to change gears and all the mirror checks that you have to do before every single maneuver and why you do them and what order you do them in. And all of a sudden, even though you technically, after being told all of this in your first lesson, technically you now have far more knowledge and understanding than naive little 12-year-old you had, you actually feel far less confident in your ability and far less adequate of a driver than you felt when you were 12 because you're suddenly aware of all of the things that you didn't know. So you're aware of all the gaps in your knowledge. You literally had no awareness of any of that stuff before. So if you've ever felt like, your confidence has dropped the more that you've learned about something, that's not actually you failing. That is you becoming more skilled, but you end up feeling like an imposter at this point, even though your actual competence technically is increasing. It is. Okay, I hope that made sense. So, next, let's layer in the emotional overwhelm that comes with all of that, because this is the piece that really starts to impact your training in real time. When you're out with your dog and something happens, and reactive dog owners will likely know this moment all too well. Ironically, because what's happening to us as the owners is actually what is happening to the dog as well, right? But maybe your dog starts lunging or they bark or they ignore a cue, they get overexcited, and your brain has to process that moment really quickly. But if your nervous system is already under pressure, your brain shifts instinctively then into a more reactive state. And specifically, we see increased activation in the amygdala, which is the part of the brain responsible for threat detection, the part that I call Captain Panic. And we see reduced access to the prefrontal cortex, which is where all of your thoughtful decision making and your planning and your rational thinking lives, right? Does any of this sound familiar? Reactive dog owners, I could literally be talking about your reactive dog's brain as well, couldn't I? So, but I'm not, I'm talking about yours because we are all of us, humans and dogs, just stressed animals, basically having a stress response. So essentially, the more overwhelmed that you feel, the less access you have to the part of your brain that knows what to do, which is why you can know exactly how to handle something because you've been taught or you've read the book or you've done the course or whatever. And yet in the moment, you don't do it. And then afterwards, you think, why didn't I just do the thing I know that I'm supposed to do in that situation? But it's not a knowledge problem. It's just a state problem, an emotional state problem. And then on top of that, we also have decision fatigue. Isn't this the reason Zuckerberg wears the same outfit every day? I feel like it is. Or is it Steve Jobs who wore the same clothes? Both of them. Maybe both of them, none of them. We don't know. The point is, every time you interact with your dog, you are making micro decisions all the time. Do I reward that thing? Do I interrupt this? Do I redirect? Do I ignore that? Do I increase distance now? Do I go back? Do I lower the criteria? Do I make it easier? Do I change the goal? And if you're constantly questioning those decisions, your brain starts to burn through energy very quickly. Decision fatigue is something that is well documented in behavioral science. It's the reason why people basically make poorer choices after long periods of decision making. And in dog training, typically, I think it just shows up as hesitation or inconsistency or just flat out avoiding training altogether because it just feels like too much. There is a very real cognitive load behind that. So, all that being said, then, how do we shift ourselves away from this? Okay, so let's talk about what actually helps. Because the goal here is not to eliminate these feelings completely, because that would frankly be unrealistic and ridiculous. But we do need to find a way to create enough structure and clarity that you can function effectively even when they are present. And I think the first shift is that you need to move from reacting to leading. Okay. And leadership in dog training does not mean control in, like a harsh or dominant sense, obviously, but it just means reducing ambiguity because ambiguity is what fuels overwhelm. So here's hack number one for you. I want you to pre-decide your training plan because one of the most powerful things you can do is remove as many in the moment micro decisions as possible. Like I said, I think this is why all of Zuckerberg's t-shirts look exactly the same. So before you even leave the house with your dog on your daily dog walk, I want you to decide, what am I reinforcing today? What is my plan if my dog does get over threshold? What positive behaviors am I on the lookout for? What am I absolutely going to ignore? This is exactly what we do in professional training. We don't just like go out there and just see what happens. We always go in with a plan because when your brain already has a roadmap, it doesn't have to scramble so much in the moment. And that alone reduces cognitive load massively. Okay. Hack number 2 for you is shrink the criteria. So, we know that the feeling of overwhelm basically comes from trying to do too much at once. So instead of thinking, okay, I need them to walk nicely on the lead. I need them to ignore distractions. I need them to respond to all my cues and I need them to stay calm and neutral. That's literally, in my opinion, that is 4 pretty epic individual objectives. We need to shrink that down. So, what is one thing I can reinforce right now? Maybe it is voluntary check ins. Maybe it's just looking for that eye contact. Maybe it's every single moment of slack lead. Maybe it is simply every choice to disengage from something. When you narrow your focus and just look for that one goal, that one objective, your brain calms itself down and then your timing improves and your dog gets clearer feedback from you. And so everything actually gets easier. Okay, hack number 3 is build default responses. I really like this one. And I get, right, that for some more nuanced issues, this isn't necessarily always possible. So we have to be realistic because we do need to be responsive to a degree. But wherever it is possible, you want to create automatic responses to common situations. So instead of thinking, oh my God, this has happened. What the hell should I do? Panic mode. You already know. You just know, and it's easy. So, for example, your dog sees another dog, and you automatically increase distance and start your engagement game if that is something that you're working on, or your dog gets overexcited. So, you pause, you create space, and you reinforce calm. So, you look for the calming physiological signals and you reinforce those. Your dog successfully disengages from something. So you know you're going to deliver immediate reinforcement. You're going to mark and reward. It's an absolute no-brainer. If you see that, that's what you're going to do. These basically become your if-then rules. If my dog does this, then I do that. And this is how we reduce decision fatigue, because you're no longer evaluating every single situation from scratch. So when you then put all of this together, what we are basically really doing is this. We are reducing cognitive load for ourselves. We are supporting our nervous systems as well. And we are creating structure for ourselves. And that combination is what moves you from overwhelmed to feeling back in control. Not because everything has just become super easy overnight. None of that's really changed, but because you become more stable when you are stood slap bang in the middle of it all. And please remember, struggling with your mindset when it comes to dog training absolutely does not mean that you are not capable or that you can't do it. It just means you're a human being and you are trying to learn a sometimes complex, layered skill in real time with another living being. Let's not forget, we're not learning to play the piano. We're trying to work with an animal that is, wild and unpredictable and real and has all its own stuff going on as well. And that is not a small thing. So give yourself some credit. And if you have been struggling in any kind of way recently, I really hope that this episode has been helpful, even in the tiniest of ways to you, even if you only take away one little tip. And don't forget, if you feel like you want more support on your dog training journey, I have a wealth of courses and resources and training packs and guides at listendogtraining.com. And also, the discount code podcast10, if you use that at checkout, you will get 10% off all of those things. And for those of you who don't want to go it solo and don't want to, go down the independent learning route, you can join my online dog training community. I call it the club. Maybe it's a cult. We don't know. But I do know that there is a truly, genuinely, absolutely fabulous bunch of people in there. And every week, a new training tutorial gets released to help you work through things like loose lead walking, settle training, designing your dog's day, growing calmness, building impulse control, and lots more besides. There's so much stuff in there now already. Plus, I'm in there as well to give you feedback and give you advice and answer your questions and help you along as you go. And it is only £15 per month. What's not to love? Tell me what's not to love. Absolutely nothing is the answer to that question. But anyway, I'm sure I've waffled on for long enough. So I will leave you to enjoy the rest of your dog walk if that's what you're up to. And I will see you very soon in the very next episode of The Walk and Talk.